On the day that was supposed to change my entire future, my own father stood at the door and told me that girls like me don't deserve a life. They only deserve to serve their brothers. My name is Diana Kraft, and this is the story of how my father deliberately destroyed my career on the most important day of my life, and how 7 years later, I made him work under me. I was 24 years old at the time. After years of struggle, rejections, and working multiple part-time jobs, I had finally cleared all the rounds and reached the final interview for a management position at one of the top companies in the city. This job could have completely changed my life and my family's financial situation. I had prepared for months. I was ready. That morning, I was dressed in my best formal clothes and was just about to leave when my father blocked the front door. He stood there with his arms crossed, looking at me coldly. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. "I have my final interview today, Dad. I told you about it last week," I replied. He didn't move. Instead, he said in a calm but sharp tone, "Your brother has brunch with his in-laws today. You're staying home and watching his kids." I stared at him, thinking I had misheard. "Dad, this interview can change everything for me. I can't miss it." My father let out a short, mocking laugh and said something that completely broke me. "Girls like you don't get lives, Diana. You get duties. Now stop being selfish and go take care of your brother's children." Before I could even respond, my brother walked in holding his 1-year-old son and casually dropped the heavy diaper bag at my feet. "Thanks, sis," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "We'll be back by evening." I looked at the diaper bag on the floor, then at my father, then at my brother. None of them saw anything wrong with what they were doing. In their eyes, this was my role in the family, to always sacrifice my future for my brother's convenience. I stood there for a few seconds, feeling something shift inside me. Then, without saying a single word, I stepped over the diaper bag, turned around, and walked straight toward the back door of the house. My father shouted from behind, "Diana, if you walk out that door, don't you dare come back." I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I opened the back door, stepped out, and never returned to that house again. That day, I didn't just walk away from an interview. I walked away from my entire family. And what none of them knew was that this was only the beginning. Because 7 years later, the same father who once told me I didn't deserve a life would end up working under me. After walking out of my parents' house that morning, I didn't go back. Not even for my clothes. I went straight to the interview, even though I was late and emotionally broken. I tried my best to compose myself, but I was shaken. I didn't get the job. The interviewer could clearly see that something was wrong with me. That same night, I stayed at a friend's house. I didn't call my parents. I didn't message anyone from my family. I just disappeared from their lives. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I had no money, no clothes, and nowhere to stay permanently. I started living in a small, cheap room and worked multiple part-time jobs, waitressing, data entry, and even cleaning offices at night. I was barely surviving, but I refused to go back home. One evening, almost 6 months after I left, my mother called me. I didn't pick up. She sent me messages saying that I was being dramatic and that I should come back home because family is family. I blocked her number. A year later, I got a small opportunity. I started working as an assistant in a mid-level company. I worked harder than anyone else. I stayed late, took on extra work, and slowly started learning everything I could. Within 2 years, I got promoted, then promoted again. By the time I turned 28, I was working as a team lead in a well-known company. I had built my life from nothing. I had my own small apartment, a stable income, and most importantly, peace. But I never forgot what my father did to me. One day, while scrolling through LinkedIn, I saw something that made me stop. It was a post from my younger brother. He had tagged my father in it. The caption read, "Proud of my dad for joining our family business as operations manager. Family first, red heart." I clicked on my father's profile. My blood ran cold. My father was now working as an operations manager in a small logistics company. From the comments and posts, it was clear that the company was struggling financially. They were not doing well. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time. For years, my father had told me that I was only good for duties and that I didn't deserve a real life. He had blocked my future from my brother's brunch. And now, he was working a mediocre job in a failing company. A strange thought started growing in my mind. What if I could make him work under me? What if I could make the same man who once said, "Girls like you don't get lives," work under my command? The idea felt impossible at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it started making sense. I had connections now. I had skills. And most importantly, I had the fire to make it happen. I started researching his company quietly. I found out that they were in deep financial trouble and were looking for a partnership or investment to survive. That's when I made my decision. I was going to buy that company, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to see the look on my father's face when he realizes that the daughter he once considered useless now owns the company he works for. After making my decision, I didn't rush. I spent the next 6 months carefully planning everything. I quietly researched my father's company, checked their financial records, and spoke to a few investors. The company was in bad shape. They had heavy loans, low profits, and were on the verge of shutting down. They were desperately looking for someone to invest and take over. That's when I made my move. I formed a small investment group with 2 of my trusted colleagues and bought 65% shares of the company. The deal was finalized within 3 months. I made sure my name was kept confidential during the entire process. No one in the company, including my father, knew who the new owner was. On the day I officially became the owner, I sat in my office and looked at the company file with my father's name on it. A strange feeling came over me. The same man who once told me that girls like me don't get lives, we only get duties, you destroyed my future without a second thought. So I decided to build my own future and make sure that one day you would have to work under me. 2 weeks later, I decided it was time to visit the office. I wore a formal black suit and walked into the company building like any other day. The staff didn't recognize me. I went straight to the operations department. As I was walking through the corridor, I saw him. My father was standing near a desk talking to some employees. He looked older. His hair had turned mostly gray, and he seemed tired. He was no longer the strong, controlling man I remembered from 7 years ago. I walked straight toward him. When he saw me, he froze. For a few seconds, he just stared at me, trying to process what he was seeing. Then his eyes widened in shock. "Diana?" he said in a low, disbelieving voice. I stopped in front of him and looked him straight in the eyes. "Hello, Dad," I replied calmly. He looked around confused, then looked back at me. What are you doing here?" I gave him a small smile and said, "I came to check on my company." He frowned, still not understanding. "Your company?" he repeated. I nodded slowly and replied, "Yes. I bought this company 2 months ago. I am the new majority shareholder." The color drained from his face. He took a step back, as if someone had slapped him. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. You bought this company?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded again. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at me. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. Why? I looked at him and answered honestly. Because 7 years ago, you told me that girls like me don't get lives. We only get duties. You destroyed my future without a second thought. So I decided to build my own future and make sure that one day you would have to work under me. He looked down at the floor. For the first time in my life, I saw shame on his face. I didn't know you would go this far," he said quietly. I took a step closer and said in a cold but steady voice, "You didn't leave me any other choice." I turned around to leave, but before walking away, I stopped and said one last thing over my shoulder. "From now on, you will report directly to me. Welcome to the company, operations manager." I didn't wait for his reply. I simply walked away. Today, it has been almost a year since that day. My father still works in the company. He doesn't talk much, and I keep my distance. He knows he can't challenge me anymore. My brother also tried to contact me a few times after he found out I owned the company, but I never responded. I have built a good life for myself. I run the company successfully and have expanded it in the last year. I don't hate my family anymore, but I also don't need them in my life. Sometimes I think about that morning when my father blocked the door and told me I didn't deserve a life. If he hadn't done that, maybe I would have still been living under his control. But because he did, I became someone he now has to answer to.